The heart has come to stand for the central, spiritual and intellectual life of a man. To receive a new heart from him. The Holy Spirit is the one that performs the operation of regeneration. It's the seat of a man's conscience in life. His conscience in life. Conscience in life.
Nudge. Give you a little nudge. A nudge? No, nudge.
See that urgent care center? It's got a serpent on it. Looks like a spinal cord, bud.
But he had to do CPR and resuscitate me, got me back breathing.
I want to pray for protection as we go through this endeavor. That I feel like you have orchestrated, that you're behind.
It's not for nobody else, it's just for me. Sorry, boys. But it's just for me.
Sometimes the impartations are just for you.
Yeah, man. Like last night, ooh, I thought it was going to fall apart.
I was out for 3 days, but I woke up on the third day out of my coma.
Heard their testimony. They love not their lives until death. And I put one in your faithful ones in there. Call on me, I will answer thee, and show you the great, mighty, unsearchable things that you do not know.
So you keep the flesh from the feed the spirit, you know what I mean?
It's hilarious. I know y'all got them cheddar biscuits, right? I fixed it.
It's in Jesus' name that I pray. Amen.
All right, folks. I want to welcome everybody to the first official recording for the Words for My Sinner audio project. It's going to be brought to you by AwakeReviveRedeem.com. Project I've wanted to get off the ground for some time. First off, I want to thank Brad Gaines and Brad Gaines Studio. I approached him about this project, and he's really went out of his way to bring a spirit of excellence to it and professionalism, and I really do appreciate that. He's taken my vision and he's really ran with it, and I want to thank Brad for that. This particular recording is going to be an interview with a good friend of mine, Austin Corn, and it has to do with a near-death experience that he had. That the story, as he tells it to me, it really resonated with me as far as things that I have been imparted with knowledge-wise, and it's the resonance that I decided to start going with the audio formats for some of my writings. And this interview is going to be part of what I'm going to use to write what we're going to call the Cornbread Chronicles, the 3 days in heaven. And I wanted to first talk about how I came to meet Austin Corn. I was working at a place called Applied Processes, and he was a new hire. And I remember the second day that he worked there, I had already given him a nickname, and my penchant for whimsical names has no end. I always seem to nickname people, especially if I like them. And Austin Corn's name became Cornbread, and it's kind of stuck. And he's a brother in Christ. And I remember the first day that we actually connected. I was back at running a machine called the 53, and we was back there, and it was toward the end of the day, and we got to talking, and I remember Austin told me about a dream that he had had, and the dream kind of had some darker persuasions to it, but it had a spiritual nature to it, and I understood what he was talking about. And there was a moment where, because this was very close to the time of April 2014, when I had a very significant experience myself when it comes to rededicating my life and changing the direction of my life, and it was still at the front of my heart. And I shared a little piece myself with Austin that day, and I got a little choked up as I went through, and I told him my story, and he picked up on that and he recognized it. And I remember him saying, just gave you a little piece of myself there, and I was like, you're right, you picked up on that. And I think that was the day Austin actually met Andy Smith, and we've been friends ever since. We parted ways there. He left Applied Processes, and I had left Applied myself, and I was working for another company. And I seen him one morning as I was plowing snow, of all things, and he told me about his story, and that he had flatlined over a Christmas holiday, which it kind of floored me. I was like, you did what now? Of course, it kind of caught me off guard. And as the months went by, and as I got more and more of his story, it just absolutely resonated with me. And I come to the realization that he left this old mortal coil for just a little bit, and he brought him something back with him. And I felt it a good thing to put it to audio and to share it with the world. Christ says you don't light a candle and put it underneath a bushel. Put it on a candlestick so it can light the whole house and give everybody light in the house. And you do the same way before men. Revelation 12 also says that we overcome the enemy by the power of the blood and by the word of our testimony. And that's really what this is about. It's about the testimony of what he went through, and what he brought back with him. And I really wanted this audio to capture the resonance that resonates with me, to hopefully share it with the rest of the people out there, if anybody is interested. And another verse I wanted to put down before we really get into the interview was Jeremiah 33:3, which I know is one of Austin's favorites. And it is basically, call unto me, and I will show you great and unsearchable things, mighty things. But those things come from within, and they come from the place where God dwells in our hearts. And for those of us out there that are seekers, that are interested, that knows there's more to this life than what we can see, what we can feel, what we can touch, this interview is going to be for you. So first off, I'll introduce Austin Corn. Do you have anything you want to start out with before we get into the meat of it?
I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be here in this moment, this time. A lot of things happening in life, people searching for the answers to life, and I think I was given a gift from above that not too many men receive and are still here. I know how the world is, and that crazy world out in that wilderness brought us to cross paths, and my story and your story are a part of his story. Wrote us both in, and so I'm here today. Maybe this will be for somebody out searching, out looking. Might help somebody, it might not, but whatever it is, Christ will use for his glory.
Amen. Well, I'm going to go ahead and get into it. I've got 3 aspects of this interview that I want to cover. I really want to go to the physical part of the situation, and then we're going to get into the spiritual part of it, and then the third part's the return, and how things have changed. But take us back to that night. What was the date?
It was Christmas Day, 2015 going into 2016. I guess I'll give you a little bit of backstory first. You know, I was raised Southern Baptist, accepted Christ when I was around 12. I spent 12 years searching for answers. You know, I lost him as quick as I found him. You know, but he shows up in big ways. You know, he shows up in big ways. And on Christmas Day, doing things that I shouldn't. You know, my past. I've sold drugs. I've been down those long, dark, hard roads that everybody takes or has taken or is on. So, you know, I can relate to just about anybody. I grew up without a father, single mom, you know, been down in the dumps, been jobless, you know, have experienced all these things in life, and I just, I'm a ugly sinner, but Christ came to save sinners, you know,
Right.
and so. But anyway, on that Christmas Day, you know, I decided to go hang out with some friends, and we actually decided to get high. I did a 25I, which is an LSD derivative, and I did some heroin. And when I did the 25I, my body rejected it, and I went into seizures. And don't know how long I was down there. My friend was upstairs, come down and found me. So how long I was down there going through that, I don't know. But he had to do CPR and resuscitate me, got me back breathing. So I could have been down there 2-3 minutes, 5 minutes, not sure, you know. And then they called the ambulance. The ambulance comes and gets me. And they rushed me to Frankfurt, and I have another seizure. By that time, they didn't know if they could keep me alive down in Frankfurt. So they decided to send me to UK. I had hypoxic respiratory failure, kidney failure. I was in a coma on a ventilator machine keeping me alive. I was out for 3 days, but I woke up on the third day out of my coma, and you know, first thing I wanted to do was talk to my mom. You know what happened, what was going on, and I told her about my experience that I had, and it changed my life.
Right.
It changed my life.
I know you had mentioned to me one time before that one of the comments that your mother had made to you during that time is that although you were there in the hospital room and you were hooked up to the ventilators and the life support, that she told you that you wasn't there.
Yeah, you know, mom said through the whole experience when she saw me in that ambulance before they took me to Lexington that I wasn't there, and I wasn't. Trust me, I wasn't. You know, it puts a whole new perspective on a twinkling of an eye. 1 minute I'm in a basement with my friends, making bad decisions, living in sin, you know, not giving no thought to God, you know. And then the next minute, you know, I think you can know when death's coming for you. I could feel it. As soon as I did the drug, I knew something was wrong. And when my eyes closed in this life, they opened up to something that I forgot and didn't even know really existed. When my eyes opened, they opened to fire, a pillar of fire. There's a fire that you can touch. There's a fire, a burning bush not consumed, but it still burns. It was elements, It's fire, water, earth, and wind. But it's when I started to rise, and I was so confused. There were voices I could hear, but I started to rise, and it was when those elements let me go that I realized they weren't elements at all. They were archangels. The 4 archangels that hold back the 4 winds, the 4 pillars. They watch over the 4 corners. Michael, Gabriel, Uriel, Raphael, them in person. I knew who they were by the symbols that they wore. And in that moment, I started to feel time, what we know as time, stand still. And in the midst of all the chaos, I heard a voice. And that voice called to me, sway with me, fill me. And out of the corner of my eye, I saw a hand sway and move, and mine followed it. And when I turned, it was the most beautiful thing that I have ever seen. Sorry, man, it gets a little emotional, you know.
I understand.
And in that moment, to see a light that burns so bright and to fall on your face, because that puts a whole new meaning on His power, His glory, His might. And at first, I was afraid. I was really afraid. And that's when He called to me. He said, Austin, I'm not finished with you yet. Do you not remember me? Do you not know me? He said it as if, have I not been here all this time? And then with a loud, thunderous voice, like thunder on mountaintops, He smiled and He said, let me show you. These eyes have seen some of the most beautiful things. Things that no man knows or has seen and not stayed, you know, is John's revelation, the truth in it, not all the bad stuff that happens on all these things, but in that twinkling of an eye, on that last trumpet that Paul talks about, the being called up, seeing Him in all His glory, and His coming on the clouds, the second coming. All these things that you hear and you read about, and men have fought over it for thousands and thousands of years about what the truth and what the meaning of life is. And after He showed me His glory, it was to be consumed by His love and by His grace, and to be baptized in the fire. You know, Matthew, I think it's Matthew or John, you know, it talks about when John was talking, preaching at the Jordan, and he said, you know, one will come after me that will baptize with fire. But in one of the Gospels, it says, baptize them in the Holy Ghost and fire. You know, so that put a whole new meaning on things. You know, I don't know, man. I've gone over and over in my brain about what happened, who I saw, but I know who I saw. And when you start to realize this Jesus guy that all these people are talking about, Jesus, he is the light. He is the way. He is the image. He is Savior. He is King. You know, and it completely changed my life. And, you know, we sit and laugh and talk about, you know, fresh manna, you know, cornbread's a bread, you know, and all the confirmations going on, you know, in in life as we move forward together. What I experienced, I know you can feel. There's been people that I've witnessed to, non-believers, and it's just talking about Jesus. It's just talking about what he's done in my life, the testimony. If you think about the Bible, Moses writing the first books, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Paul, their writings they encountered God. They encountered this crazy sounding ideal that the earth and everything was created by a creator. It has grand design. It just didn't happen out of nothing. The Big Bang Theory is ridiculous stuff, and you really don't know in your heart, because you always have the doubt. You don't know for sure, like most people. They were talking about today, the Pharisees and them wanting Jesus to give them a sign, give them a sign that he was who he said he was. And the Gentiles, they thought it was nonsense, but it's the testimony of men, that you read, that God uses. When he called Peter, he said, "I'll make you a fisher of men." He'll teach you how to fish for men and women, and to bring him to him, and by preaching his word, and by just telling people about Jesus everywhere you go. You just Jesus. Some people, I'd be talking to him like, "I'm sorry, I like talking about Jesus, because he saved my soul. He changed my life." And not only did that, Jeremiah, that's why it's so important to me. 33:3, man. 3 threes. That's, that thing means something, And no matter, through all the chaos, he said, "If you'll call to me, I will answer. And not only will I answer, but I will tell you great and unsearchable things you don't know." And I looked upon his face, and when you look into that glory, when you peer into that glory, what do you think you're peering into? In the beginning, in Genesis, he's Shiloh. You know what I'm saying? In Exodus, he's the I am. Samson, it was a preview. Outstretched hands bringing 2 pillars down. Christ with outstretched hands brought down the pillars of sin and death with his blood. There's all these confirmations and all these readings, and when you start reading it, you're not going to get it at first. I didn't get it at first. And do I deserve any of the things I received? No, sir. I'm the worst, just like Paul said. I'm the worst of the worst.
Chief of sinners.
He was murdering Christians, but if he can get called by that dude, that all things were created for, created by, and created through. Yep. And that word became flesh and it dwelt among us. All these things, and people search for the truth, and they may never receive it till it's time, till it's their time to leave. But I know what I looked upon and gazed upon. I gazed upon my Creator, the one that came as self, and took the blunt of my sin and died on the cross for her. People say, "Oh, well, no one's seen the face of God," but Jesus also said, "Blessed is the man who is a pure heart, for he will see God." And to see his glory, and the praise that he's given, and when he starts to move, creation itself starts to dance.
You speak about confirmation, and the one thing about this project, and the reason that I wanted to pursue it, is because of the amount of confirmation of myself that has came through you. And what I mean by that is that old verse that says, if you ask for bread, I won't hold back. And most of my life, very, very young in life, I always had those moments to where I would literally, call out in prayers like, "God, I want you to reveal yourself to me. I want to know you. I want to seek out these things." And he was faithful to not hold that back. And it was a blessing and a curse at the same time. And it was a blessing because of the amount of peace that comes on you when he shares those spiritual truths that you can't really put into words, but they land on your heart and they bring peace onto it. But the curse is that a lot of times you assimilate that alone, and it's like each man, seek out your own salvation with fear and trembling. And there was, for many years, I'm thinking to myself, well, what is, I'm grateful for these things that he's showing me, and these visions that I have, and these knowings, impartations, however you want to say it. But it was the times that you started to speak your testimony, and it's like there's a gravitas of my heart when I hear truth. And it's like the times that I've told you that when you're saying something, there's literally a hum that comes directly from you and just comes to me. And it's that truth of confirmation and edification of, maybe I'm not crazy, maybe I'm not making all this stuff up in my head, because here's somebody that is not me, that is speaking the things that I thought only I knew, that I thought only God had shared with me. And some of the things that you mentioned was that really caught my attention, and I liked the way that you said it, was when you talked about the angels that were speaking in the tongues of fire. And they had their own language, and it was ininterpretable, but you knew what they were saying. And the other thing that just floored me when you said it is that when the big guy spoke, the angels just fell silent.
Silence. To hear the word that spoke creation, to hear it for real,
right?
And not only hear it, but it call your name. And the angels, I knew. There were the voices, I couldn't understand what they were talking, but I know they were talking about me, that they didn't talk to me, but I know there was a lot of discussion about something. And then all of a sudden, it all fell silent. And he makes time stand still. There's no such thing as time, and all we know is life. You're born, you get old, you die, and that's it. But it's not it. It's not all there is. There's a separation deep inside you is something so complex and so much more far vast than the physical that we see and that we've known. And I think he reveals himself to more people than you think, of course, I just don't know. I just don't think they know how to listen, or they know how to pay attention, because they're so lost in the world. They're so lost in the physical world, and in the
distractions.
Yeah, in the distractions and the stuff, But Paul said, I was called up to third heaven, where I was in my body or outside my body, I don't know. I know I was out of my body. I know what it feels like, a separation of the soul. You don't have a soul, you are a soul. Right. And you are part of a spirit. There's a connection between everybody, and you have a flesh. And this flesh fades away and dies, but what's inside is far beyond what this world is. And to the feeling of having your bondage broke, to be free of the bondage of sin and the flesh and everything, and being free, being truly free. And not only that, but to be in the presence of something that did that really happen? Is that really what life really, what creation and the meaning of life really is him. And the heavens fell silent at his voice, and his voice just carries and rattles, but because of his love and his grace and his mercy, it goes deep into your soul. And spiritual language, there's not a tongue that can be heard in this world to be spoke as he speaks.
Right.
It's a spiritual language that's it's far beyond the speaking in tongues. It's far beyond the different things. I think there's different levels. Of course, there's different beings. There's different ways that he spread his glory out to the world. He made us in his image, but there's other things in his creation that worship him and praises his name. You know,
the one of the other things that really harped a tune, if I can say it that way, in my
struck
soul.
a chord.
Struck a chord.
Struck a chord, man. We get together. It's hard to. Sometimes it's hard to kind of chill, you know, because it's very intense. It's very, and it just radiates off of you like a flame.
When you mentioned the swaying, and it's almost like the way, at least the way I interpreted it when you talked about it, was that at that moment in time, you know, God was not really giving you a piece of himself, but you were becoming part, you were realizing part of what you were connected to. And he knew the restraint, in other words, of, you know, sway with me. Don't come in too far.
Yeah.
If you come in too far, then I won't be able to send you back to where I want you to go, to take this back with you. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I understood that ebb and flow, and that's one of those things. That's one of those spiritual things that you can't really put a word or a sentence to. That's just something that hops from you to me,
right? Person to person, live. You know, talking with each other. Like I said, telling people about Jesus, fishing, being a fisher of men. That's the meaning of life. That's the meaning to this life. Is he's God, and he's been doing it since day one. He's been fishing for men since day one, and talking to another person face to face, and engaging yourself with them, and letting your light shine through you onto him. He'll use you, and not only will he use you, but you can witness in what I call witnessing in the spirit. He's on you so much that he's just leaking off onto everybody else, you know, and they you know, I've had a couple people that I'm talking to that's non-believers or, you know, got that on the back burner, and all of a sudden it's like something happens in the spirit, his spirit, he comes down and he manifests, and not only can I feel it, but that person can feel it, and they acknowledge that they feel it, and this person is saying, well, I don't believe, but you're feeling it. That's where that testimony, how important it is for a person to be written in God's story, to encounter God, and then him use you to encounter other people. And a lot of people my age, I'm 27, a lot of people my age, they ain't talking about Jesus. They're not. There's some that are, you know, but if this world really knew what really existed, and how much this life is so far from his original creation before we fell. If they realized the magnitude,
the gravity of the situation.
It is escalating quickly. You know, some of these people listening aren't going to get some of these things, but you know, we've been doing this for about a year now, you know, getting together and talking, and finally we're about to get a little bit on audio, you know, and see where it goes. There'll probably be many more sessions. Maybe we'll get a little bit more organized, or I will, you know, but you know, this has been a great journey, a great ride, man.
Right.
And I'm excited about where God's going to take me. You know, I've lost jobs, but I wasn't even worried because I know God's leading me somewhere else, and I always cross the paths of these people that are searching. They were searching like I was. I searched for 12 years. See, I saved in since 2004. So 12 years I searched and cried out, and I'd been saved. You know, I was naked as the day I come in this world, and fell to my knees and said, God, I want to know you. And I took that first step. It's always about taking that first step. He said, if you seek me, if you search for me, if you look for me with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your being, you'll find him. And I felt a hand on my shoulder that day, and a week later I got baptized in the water. You know, I think baptism in the water, you know, we get in there and do that, proclaim, you know, who your king is, and and it's an important thing. And I think you receive Christ. You know, you have to be born again. I think you're born again then. And I think some of us, you know, go through this life and we get born again and we have a relationship with Christ. But I think some other people like me and you, kind of misfit toys out, you know, in the wilderness. You know, there's places that the church will never reach.
Exactly.
There's a place that the church will never reach. You know, I've done the drugs. I've been down those rabbit holes that you call and you get distracted with. So I can definitely relate to people. You know, I've been there. I've been through the things you're going through. But Christ is the way. You have to remove yourself emotionally, physically from this world and look at it as a whole. People say, oh man, you know, you did a drug that night. That's possibly could have happened. Look, I've done a lot of things in my life. I've experienced life. I've lived life. I've done the drugs. But what happened to me that night? There's not a drug in the world that could experience that. It does. There's. I know what I felt. I know what I heard, and I know what I saw. I know what I could touch. It was just as real as I'm looking at you now. It was more realer than this, and it's one of the most magical things you could ever experience. And why he chose me, I don't know. I'm just a lost man. You know, a lost man out in the wilderness, but being lost is so close to being found.
You know what's funny is you say, you know, you mentioned the 12 years, which that's another direct connection. Because probably the second recording that I'm gonna do for the Words for My Sinner audio project is going to be my personal testimony that I wrote in 2014. And in that personal testimony, when it gets to the point of the crossroads, from the time that my first son was born, Dylan, and I got married to his mother, baptized, all at a feverish pace, and there was a point when things went south from that rededication to the spiritual attacks happening, and I backed off, and I went through a 12-year period of...
You can't make this up.
Of being mad at God for not being the deity that I needed him to be.
We're same boat, different paddle. You can't make this up.
You're right. And I mean, 12 years, and then in 2014, in a 17-foot tandem axle work trailer, you know,
yeah.
The good Lord comes down and visits me and changes my life.
Changes your life. And you haven't been right since. You haven't been right since. No. You haven't felt normal since. You haven't been right since. Since Christmas, I've never felt normal or felt right.
The old Iron Maiden song, "A Stranger in a Strange Land."
Right? You know, we're just voices out in the wilderness.
Land of ice and snow.
You know, witnesses. We just witnessed and experienced his glory and his love.
Well, when you come back, once the return happened, once you regained consciousness, I know the first thing you did is you talked to your mom about it. And I know you've already kind of touched on a little bit of this, but some of the major ways that experience has changed your life from before that night to the 3 days after when you woke up. I mean, what is the difference between the pre-Austin and the post-Austin?
Man, dude, I used to sit around and be angry at the world, cuss at my mom, be a terrible son, be a terrible friend. You know, me and my cousin Adam, you know, we used to have all kinds of fun, and we kind of parted ways, and then all this has happened to me, and it's brought back my family back in my life. I got my mom going back to church. She couldn't find a home. So we're going to Nineveh now. You know, definitely get fed out there. Shout out to Terry Cooper, as our pastor out there. Check him out, man. He's got fresh manna. You know, he's got fresh manna, and just smiling a whole lot more, man, and being happy about life. I don't worry about the worries and cares in life anymore, because I know what awaits all of us. Every man, believer, non-believer, will stand before God and find out the truth. But I hope that maybe someone listening to this or somebody somewhere he continues to pour his Spirit out on, and change the heart of stone to a heart of flesh. And used to, my heart was full of stone, and then after that day, he took it and molded it and formed it, and now I just care about people, man. It's just talking, people doing what we're doing right now, fellowshipping with each other.
Yep.
You know, people get tired of me talking about Jesus. I'm talking about Jesus, you know, at work. You know, people kind of looking at me like, no, it's okay. It's okay. I'm a crazy kook. You know, I'll be crazy till I die with the Lord, man. He reconciled himself on the cross. He took the whole wrath of his law and everything and bundled it up into man, and he was crucified, and it gave away. Christ became my mediator, Jesus Christ. And who I stood in front of is not Allah, is not Krishna, it's not Buddha, it's not all these other gods, it's not Muhammad. Those things, those beliefs, those ideologies, they're just leading to your death, just like my sin. My sin led to my death. Repent of your sins. What is sin? Sin is falling away from what you know in your heart's right, from what calls you in your heart is right. That's the falling away from that. That's not listening to his voice that resonates. You know, it's ignoring, you know, the voice that I know you can hear. Even, you know, I got a homosexual cousin. She said she don't like going to church. She don't feel comfortable. Why? Because you feel conviction. As soon as you walk in that building, your spirit recognizes where it's at, and it starts to say, oh man, have I been screwing up? You know, and all these other religions, you know, how they say, oh, how do you know you got the right religion? Look, I don't have religion. I have absolute truth. Absolute truth. And those other religions, you can see, talking about Sarah and Abraham, you know, talking about Christ, taking a clay bird and breathing it to life. Muhammad never did anything like that. He doesn't bring life. You know, it all, there's just a little bit of truth and a whole lot of lies. And it's just enough truth to get you in the door. Then once they got you in the door, you know, you need other people like us praying for the world, praying that God pours out His Spirit and not let those people be deceived into traveling down these roads. Who knows? I might get bomb threats talking like that, you know.
Well, let me ask you this
question. But no, it's been a great ride, man.
If you had it to do over, if you had that night to do over again, would you take the same path? Would you? I guess what the right way to ask it would be, would you want that experience again?
Almost definitely want the experience, but you know, I guess in that situation, I wouldn't go back in time and change anything, because he's been molding me and making me and doing all these things. You know, we had confirmation on the 12 years last night. I was sitting in the truck after I grabbed some coffee, wake up late. I'm third shift, long story short. But I knew we were doing this interview today, so I kind of got with the Lord last night and was listening to music and all the confirmations and numbers, you know, being 27, 7 the year of grace. You know, when I was going through that at the time. Well, actually, no, I'm 28 now. Now, I think it last year, you know, when all that happened, that year coming in was 2016. You know, 666, the devil, you know, year of death, you know, and being 27, 7th year of grace, you know, it just all kind of fell in. You know, 7,000th year of Christ comes, gets renewal. So there's all these confirmations, you know, coming from everywhere. And then I thought, 27 too, go to Genesis, the second day. You know, He separated the waters from above and the waters below, and He created a firmament. And you know, day one, He creates a light. His Spirit hovers over the waters, and He creates a light, and saw that the light was good. The light was Christ. And He's always made separations. If you notice, He separated the Israelites from Gentile. You know, He separated all these things. He established all these things at the beginning of creation. So everything that I went through up to that point, I noticed that he's a before the fact God. he's not a oh, something happened, didn't react God. He's a before the fact God.
Right.
He established Christ at the beginning of everything.
The whole thing.
He established me at the beginning of everything. He established you. He established all of us. He knew us before we were in the womb and before the foundations of the earth. He's seen it all.
The perfect foreknowledge.
And when you see his glory, you'll understand. People ain't got no clue what glory looks like. No clue. Not a single smidgen clue, besides the ones that he called. And am I special? No. I'm not special. You know, I'm just a regular dude out there. I'm not appointed. Everybody said, "Oh man, you should start writing. you should be a preacher, a pastor." Let God call the preachers and the pastors. I'm not one of those guys. Like I said, I'm just a guy out eating locusts and honey, and whoever happens to come by, hey, heaven's coming. Repent. The kingdom of heaven is at hand. You know, and that was Jonah's message. That was John the Baptist's message. And you know, I sat with my Savior face to face for a long, long time. And didn't have to ask for nothing. He was feeding me all these information just to hear his voice is make mountains fall on his knees. But I sat in his presence face to face. Face to face. And his love and mercy is abounding. And if he can love a sinner like me, he can love you as well.
I can attest to that.
And all these hard hearts and all these people saying these things they don't believe in, they say all these, they'll find out soon enough. But I hope and pray they come across somebody like me, or he has planned all these things. You know, when Saul went out looking for the donkeys, he thought he was looking for donkeys. Right. But God established him to come across Samuel and to become the king of Israel for a while. Their anointed guy at the time, you know, to lead them. You know, that's in the time of the Judges and the Old Testament. And you got to look at it as a whole, man. All of it's written, it's written by men. Yeah, but it's men encountering God. And not only did they encounter God, but he influenced those men and those people to write in a book his word, his life. It's the greatest love story ever told. When all this happened to me, I quit studying history. Right. And I started studying his story. You know, because it's amazing. It's the most magical tale that has ever been told, and guess what? You're a part of it.
The prophetic pattern ripples through all the time, as far back as you can go.
It's just it's crazy, man. And this world is run by brutes and evil men. And Scientology, it's a religion of its own. You know, these people that say all these things, and if you speak out, you know, against Darwinism or evolution, all this, and it points to a creator, they're not having it. So there's a chord in there, like some of this stuff, you know, here we go, flat earth, all these different ideals, there's something to them. But like you said, you always filter things back through Christ. Yep. Whether it's flat or round, I know he can fulfill who he is. But I see it being flat and not round, that it would be, if it was flat, pointed to a creator. If there's a big universe with all this space and time and these things that have created, it makes you think you're small and you're not important. But let me tell you something, you're divine. You are divine, and you were made and you were molded as a potter molds clay. And there's no mistakes. You say, oh, these people are sick, these things are that. Let me tell you something, regardless of where their paths go, he's going to bring glory through them. And on that day, he'll raise them up, and they'll share in his glory, of whom God gave over to Christ, and who he knew at the beginning of time, no matter what, even if they sinned in their hearts, they loved him. And that's all that matters. That's all that matters.
All right, I'm gonna let Brad do his thing. We're gonna lay down a track with Adam, and we'll get his take on some of this, because I know you and him's pretty close.
Yeah, man. Adam has gone through a lot of, we relate to each other. We've gone through a lot of things, and there's been times we've been in his living room, him and his brother and me, and we just sit and cry and talk and all these things, and they can feel it. Whatever I got, whatever I receive, that gift, it does radiate onto other people. But it's all credit to Christ, to Jesus Christ, the true King, the true Messiah. When he comes, we'll be with him, and we'll share in his glory. So that gives us hope. And if he can call people like Paul, he can call people like me, and he can bring glory to himself and raise you up in the same way. He said he would be the first of many.
Right.
Well, you're talking to one of the many. Not too many people got to experience a resurrection. If it wasn't for man-made stuff, I you know what I'm saying? If it had been 100, 200, 300 years ago experiencing that, I'd be dead. Well, I wouldn't say so. Craig would probably raise me from that too, But he gives life. He gave me life. He gave me a second chance. Said he wasn't finished with me, so I'm excited to see where he's going to take me. Didn't show me the future besides his coming and being called up, But everything in my life, what he'd been doing, he'd been fooling with me since day one. Been watching over me, had his hand on me, leading me, guiding me, and had planned to show me those things. Why, I don't know. Maybe it's just so I can wow somebody and bring them over to Christ, because that's what life's about. It's about making him famous. And making him famous, he'll raise you up at the last day. And you share in that glory, and you share in the fruits of the gift of life, and drink from those waters. I've had a taste of those life-giving waters, and they taste pretty good.
I appreciate your time and your honesty.
Yeah, man. Thank you for your candor.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure, man. I'm glad we got to do this. It's different every time. Just kind of going through people taking parts of my story that they need, man.
Right.
When I tell them, all I can do is tell my story and plant the seed. God makes it grow.
So, Adam, welcome to the Cornbread Chronicles, 3 Days in Heaven. I want you to just kind of open up and talk about what kind of happened when Austin first told you his story, and some things that you were doing, as far as Austin at that point in time, and how it correlates with you and your walk and your witness, and how, if any, it's changed your life.
Well, thanks for having me, and I appreciate you asking me to do this and be a part of this, because I know it's special to everybody sitting here, and me and Austin, my mother, she's babysit all of us and whatnot when we grew up as kids, so not just me and Austin being cousins, but we've been friends a long time and hung out a lot and stuff. But when Austin first came to my house, after I knew that he had gotten healed and stuff, I really didn't know what to expect, because I was over at a friend's house, and she had asked me, she said, "Have you heard about your cousin?" I said, "What's that?" And she was like, "Well, somebody said he died. He overdosed and died." And I was like, "What? Get out." And I didn't think too much of it. A couple days or weeks, something went by, and I ended up calling him, and instantly, I knew something was different, because he was just, he was so happy, ecstatic. He was like, "Man, I gotta come over and tell you what happened," because I'd heard he'd been in the hospital and things like this. And I mean, he walks in the door, and he was like, "You have no idea, the God that we serve." He just starts getting so like into this, and I can feel the spirit just radiating off of him, and he's, his hands are shaking, and right now he's got short hair, but he did have really long hair, and it was just, never seen him like that, so it was really crazy. And I tried not to laugh at him, but he's just getting all worked up and telling me this, and I'm just trying to just try to listen and pay attention to what he's telling me. It just really touched my heart because, at that moment, because I hadn't found really anybody to relay my story to who felt it, and I felt like as he was telling me, and he already knew my story, and I felt it, so I didn't feel crazy, because I know what I saw, know what I heard, and it was just, I was so happy. I was so happy because I was really, after I got clean, I really feared for his life. And, technically, I guess, yeah, he died, his body, people's like, well, did he really die? Well, I don't know, you ask me, people die today in this life when it's their time to go, their body's still here. So that's what happened. Austin died, his body was still here, and God took his spirit to be with him. So Austin is in the presence of Jesus, just completely getting consumed by the glory of God. To think about the power of God, and a disciple walk down the street and people are healed by that shadow. Or the lady that was bleeding for so many years, she touched Jesus' garment and she was instantly healed. And Jesus felt that power go out, and Jesus told her that by her faith she was healed. And people question all the time as to whether or not they believe in this and that. Well, God, my sin is great, but God's love is greater. If you think there's a doubt, or you have problems believing or something, ask God to help you out, because God is love. He wants to help people. But Austin came and told me a story, and I knew he was changed. And still to this day, like, we get together and hang out all the time, and Andy, we hang out all the time now, and it's great, cut up, make jokes, but we don't, we can't get together and not talk about God now, and I love it, and the Spirit moves, and it's just incredible, because, I walk out around in here, and, I see people that's lost in things, and God most definitely in these last days is pouring out his Spirit on mankind, and I hope that does some justice with the question you asked me.
Yeah, the thing that I really love about our times that we get together is we could talk about God, and we've become comfortable enough with each other that we can make the jokes, and we can laugh about it, and we can cry about it, and it all comes out as a spirit of honesty. It's really, I heard somebody say one time that transparency is the maturity of grace. And when you really think about that, we all know we have our pitfalls, our downfalls. We all have our shortcomings. We all have our devices that hold us back. And Jesus is fully aware of that. But His grace is sufficient. His grace abounds. And hearing you just, adding the cherry on top to the end of this, you take Austin coming back, and as he has been bold enough to tell his story to other people, but me and you, it seems to me like you've gotten just as much confirmation and edification out of his story than just as much as I have. And when you think about it, as we're sitting here in this room, and look at it, it's kind of a triangle. There's a triad here. Here we are at the point of three again. And just like Austin says, you really can't make this stuff up. And I think at some point I'm going to do another interview with Adam, because he's got quite an extensive story himself as to some of the things that he's went through, and I'd like to devote a little bit of time to just his story, and we'll get that. We'll come up with this. A snappy name for it, like the Cornbread Chronicles. But we're going to get together. We're going to do that with Adam. And but right now, I want to thank for everybody that's listening. So everybody that's listened, I'm going to use this interview. There will also be a text version, a written version of this account, as far as from my viewpoint, that I will use a lot of what Austin said throughout this interview, for those that prefer reading versus audio, which I think is few and far between. But The one thing you're really going to miss out on the text is going to be the resonance that comes through this mic. And one of the things that I want to put across there more than anything is that God's real, and He loves all of us, and He spends an extreme amount of His time and His energy pursuing us. He has given His Son into this world in the form of flesh, crucified on a cross, that we may be reconciled unto Him. And it all comes from a divine love that we cannot really fathom inside of our minds in this physical plane of existence. And I want to absolutely say to everybody on the other side of this microphone that may the grace of Christ, the love of Creator, and fellowship with the Holy Spirit be with you all.
That's what got the bush on fire.
Hold it on your face.
I think this one's broken.